I feel like all of us are wired to be Sendy moms. Mindfulness or meditation is not to teach us how to sit still. It's how to teach us to be mindful in all of our to-dos. We're all walking on a tightrope, and everyone is in the world. Every mortal is walking on a tightrope. Everyone who doesn't have a terminal illness is walking surrounded by a lovely fog. And every once in a while, you get a peek down to the chasm that's below you, and you realize the danger and the fragility of our mortality. But with living with a terminal illness, you have no fog.
There's no fog. You see
and
it.
you are
You know
literally on the chasm, and you know that chasm is coming. Do this.
I know.
Let's do this Sendy style.
I know. I'm really excited to talk to you about this. So first off, do you understand what Sendy means? Like, what does Sendy Mom mean to you?
I just feel like it means pretty much carpe diem. Just do it, even if it's like high risk or, take the plunge.
Yep. And that's pretty much what I mean. And it's not necessarily going to do some high risk activity either. It's not like going to rock climb or going to, skydive or anything like that. It's like doing things that are just hard for you and just trying new things. So, okay, I appreciate that. And why would you be interested in being on this podcast?
Well, because you are a dear friend, number one. I feel like all of us are wired to be Sendy moms, because being a mom is about being Sendy.
It requires some resilience to be able, because we're all going to fail and we're all going to make mistakes. And so we need to be able to bounce back from that. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, and just try things, because if you sit down, you're going to go backwards. It's like being on an escalator, right? Mm-hmm. And if you stand still, you're going to go down. You have to just keep moving forward.
Yeah. So it's constant motion.
Well, tell me a little bit about yourself and about maybe the family you grew up in and the family that you have now.
Okay. So I am originally from New Mexico. I was at the doctor the other day and I apologized because I hadn't done something prior to the appointment. And I said, you know what? I need to not apologize. And he said, are you from Utah? And I said, no. And he said, because Utah women are notorious for apologizing. And I said, no, I'm from New Mexico. And that is why I'm not going to apologize. I appreciate your patience. I'm not going to apologize that I didn't do XYZ. So yes, I am not from Utah. I'm happily living in Utah, but I am from Albuquerque, New Mexico, born and raised. And my family of origin, I am the youngest of four. I think our upbringing is part of really the reason why we all are the way we are is because of our upbringing. Sure. So my parents, I guess backstory, my mom has a genetic mutation that it's a collagen disorder that affects bones and anywhere there's collagen, but especially bones. And so I grew up, because she has the mutation, it was a 50-50 chance. So 3 out of the 4 of us ended up with osteogenesis imperfecta.
3 out of 4. Oh my goodness.
So
that's
the
huge.
stats didn't
but at least you had each other to kind of talk to.
And my mom, because she was the mutant. Okay. So she didn't actually know anything about it, because this was like before the internet, and she grew up in small town southern New Mexico.
So she didn't even know there was something that was wrong.
She
just knew she was smaller.
And she knew that like she broke her bones for no reason, like twice. I think two or three times that were like kind of unexplained. So she knew something was different. But it wasn't until she was in college that her friend took a medical class and came home and said, you know what? I think I just read about what you have, because your teeth look this way, the whites of your eyes look this way. And my mom really made it clear that she wanted me to have a normal childhood. So she made sure that I still learned how to ride a bike, and I still, and so I'd fall and I'd break a bone, or I'd whatever, but she wanted me to not just sit
Yeah.
a pillow and
Okay. So, yeah. Well, that's great because she really taught you some resilience
oh, for
and to
sure.
be confident and to just try it even though. So did you really break a bone? Like,
Oh yeah, all the time.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
because your bones are brittle.
yeah. So
Okay.
before, the way that I'm pretty mild comparative to what other severities are with OI. So I'm fairly mild. So I probably broke my bones maybe 3 to 4 times a year.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
and then
I
once I
can't even
hit
imagine.
puberty, then it actually, with the hormones, it subsided. And
Okay.
so after puberty, really was
Pretty normal.
so I do have to be more careful. But
And are your siblings kind of the same?
yeah. So I have a sister that passed away in a car accident when she was, well, so it was 20-ish years ago. And she had OI. And then my sister, who is still surviving, she also has OI. So I've got a niece and a nephew that have it. And then out of my 2 biological children, Maggie has it. So that's my family of origin. And that's kind of the way we were raised, is like, just do all the things. And my dad's family, this is a very interesting yin and yang. Very, very high risk, very adrenaline junkies, always like out on the lake doing like pyramid jet skiing. And like my grandpa at age 80 something did that lagoon ride where you get pulled back in the slingshot. Like that's just how the Moody's are wired.
Okay.
And so you've got my mom, who's like got these kids that are fragile, and then she's married to the Moody family. And so family reunions were always just like, people were jumping off roofs into swimming pools, roof to trampoline to swimming pool. Like that was the norm in the Moody family. And so then it was like, how do you fit in when
what was that like for your mom to have to she's trying to protect you because she knows that there these dangerous things that are going to break your bones, and you're going to have to go to the hospital, and that's a pain in the butt to have to deal with. So how did she manage that?
She taught us a lot about self-advocacy. Okay. And that was really important. And so she also, as her backstory, she specialized in special education. Okay. And so she started out working with the blind, and then she ended up just in the special education world, working with like resource kids and IP specialist. So she really understood like the ADA world about disability and advocacy, and so in terms of fitting into the family life, it was just, you need to be the one to speak up and say, no, I don't want to.
Okay, so where would you put yourself on the spectrum of cautious to reckless?
I'm definitely, right now in my life, I'm very cautious. I would put myself in the middle prior to becoming a wife and a mother. Okay. That I was pretty middle of the road. I went rappelling. I think I did water stuff, tubing, and I never did do skiing because that was probably not a good idea. But
you could.
I stayed pretty active and doing things that I felt were triathlons. I did some triathlons.
Yeah, and well, that's great. But, and well, tell me about your experience with your triathlon. How old were you when you did that?
That actually, it was when we were first married, the first little bit, and that was very it felt like a big deal when I did it, just because it was a big push for something active and pushing my boundaries in terms of like, I've never been competitive. That's the other thing. I am not a competitive person. Okay. And so I think that is, maybe more like less Sendy. Yeah. That I'm just like, I'm just happy to do what I can do.
You're satisfied.
And so that's where triathlons was like a happy fit, because it was like, you're working against yourself. Right. But there's all these people around you that are going faster and better. And then you have to just say, but it's not about them. It's about me. Right. And so that's something that in my life, definitely that quote, comparison is the thief of joy, has been a very big part of understanding how I stand versus everyone else, because you will always feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, that's true. What are some tools maybe that you use to keep yourself from comparing yourself to others?
I think it goes both ways too, because I could compare myself to someone and say, oh, I'm not as good as them.
Right.
Or I could compare myself to my strengths and say, well, I'm better than you are. And you end up feeling like
lousy
a
every time.
terrible person.
I know, either way.
Right. And so, honestly, it's in the moments of self-reflection, and being more mindful, just as I'm realizing like, oh gosh, I feel bad. Why do I feel bad?
Yes.
And we just talked about this in a meditation class that Nick and I went to, and it's this idea that first you assess your feeling tone, whether it's a negative, a positive, or a neutral feeling. And then from there you say, well, what am I going to do about that? Am I going to do something helpful or unhelpful? And so if I say to myself, I'm comparing myself, so I say that's a negative feeling tone. Well, am I going to do something helpful and say, I need to stop and redirect, or unhelpful and say, let me just feed that?
Yeah, because you can go anywhere with those are just thoughts, and the thought can be anything. And so you have the circumstance that happens, whatever that happens to be, and then you get to choose how you're going to deal with it. I love that you're doing some meditation or learning how to do meditation, because I think that's super important to be able to stand back when you have a feeling and take a look at it and say, like, why am I feeling this? Negative, positive, what's the emotional context? And then how can I, take this feeling and make it a positive experience for me? Because we don't want to necessarily ignore all those negative feelings.
Right. And that's something that I've been prone to. And I think because of my history with physical pain, is that I've ignored pain to where my pain tolerance is unhealthy, too high. And because I ignore and we really shouldn't ignore negative feelings. We need to say, that is negative. Let it sit with us. Let it teach us.
Yes.
And then choose to be helpful and move on and learn from it. So that's been really key for me. And one of the things that we talked about too in this class is just that mindfulness or meditation is not to teach us how to sit still. It's how to teach us to be mindful in all of our to-dos.
Yeah, and introspective. And
so that we're not
deliberate.
Just being rote and just mindless in any of the actions. And so that helped me to realize, just in terms of going back to the comparison, is when I am feeling that ick about myself, and then I can say, well, why? I'm not needing to sit down on a cushion and meditate and be zen. I can just say in the moment, right then.
Yeah. I'm definitely more competitive. So one of the things that I've done, like to get over this competitiveness is, well, first of all, I just never competed because I just didn't like losing. And so it was hard, in my own way, I guess.
Yeah, no, probably. That is a sign of giftedness. If you're not going to be the best, then you just don't do it. Yeah. Exactly. So that is a compliment to you.
But I decided I need to work on this. And so I started playing pickleball with a lot of people in the neighborhood, and I was not very good. Like most things, when you try them, you're not going to be very good. You have to be bad at something before you're going to be good at it. But that's the thing, you just have to keep doing it for a long time, and then you get better at it. And so I kind of kept going, but I would lose like every single game, and I would come home and I would cry. I would feel so horrible, really, like as an adult. And I would be like, I don't know why I keep going back. I should just stop doing this. But I just kept going. And I started getting better and better. And I talked to my sister, who's a great softball player. And she told we'd lose games all the time. And I would hit bad hits and everything. And she said, what I would do was write one thing on a piece of paper that I wanted to work on during that game. And I'd put it in my back pocket, and I would just think about that one thing that I was going to work on. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And so after that, things got so much better, because then I'd think, okay, I'm just going to make sure that all of my serves are going to the right place. And I'd work on that. And every time my serve went to the right place, I would be like, yes, I won, and nothing else mattered. And so that's one of the tools that, we can use as we're trying new things to keep going, even though, it maybe, you may want to quit, I
Yeah.
guess. And that's one thing that can kind of help you to keep going.
No,
What do
it's
you think?
definitely, yeah, focusing on just being a little bit better every day on one thing. And to circle back to my family now, that's something that I have seen in the hardships, for me have been when I have compared. Like I think back to Nick and I, my husband and I, we got married 17 years ago, and his former wife had passed away from cancer, and they had a daughter who was 2 at the time when Nick and I met. And so when we got married, I adopted her, and we were experiencing infertility. Mm-hmm. And that comparison with infertility was like a special kind of crazy. Yeah. That was like for reals insanity. When Hannah in the Bible, they talk about how she would come to the temple and they thought she was drunk. No, she wasn't drunk. She was just
in mourning.
Really? Yes, and deep desperation. Yeah. And I felt that. Like I really felt like I was losing my mind. So we ended up doing foster care because my impression as we were trying to start a family, add to our family, not start because we had Allie, is that we just needed children in the home. And I thought to myself, well, that was like the dumbest answer to a fasting prayer month long, months and months. And I said, because we're trying to have children in our home. Yeah. And so I thought, so it ended up being funneled towards foster care. And so that was actually very healing for me because we ended up, after 2 years we had 5 placements, and our 5th placement was our son, Damien, that we got him as a newborn and ended up adopting him. And in the adoption process, we realized, learning more about adoption, we were like, oh, actually, I need to adopt Allie because I didn't realize that there were a lot of legal implications. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, we ended up adopting Allie. I ended up adopting Allie and Damien on the same day.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it was fun.
Okay, that brings up questions because most like a lot of times when you're trying something new or you're sending something, it's a choice, right? And it's something that you choose to go climb that mountain or whatever. You've had a lot of things that have just been thrust upon you, where you've had to make the decision to, okay, I'm just going to go with it and do it. Like, tell me about some of those experiences.
Well, so yeah, with being born with osteogenesis imperfecta, that's not something you choose. It's just that's your standard. And then later on in marriage with infertility, and also being married in not the typical cookie cutter type marriage, that it was a second marriage.
And you're automatically inheriting this child.
Yes. And so I stopped my career. I was an elementary school teacher, and I stopped my career and became a stay-at-home mom. And I had no idea that there was a type of stress that would come from leaving a career.
And how old was Allie at the
time? Allie was 3 at that point. She had a lot of trauma, and so understandably was a handful.
Okay, but tell me about, you were talking about leaving your career.
Yes.
Was real hard.
Yeah, and that was really difficult because of validation. It was like this, sure, you get a paycheck that's validating, that says, okay, this is a monetary equivalent of what except when you're a teacher, it's not equivalent. You really do work so hard. Anyway, but it's, you would get from your peers and from your students that say, oh, Miss Moody, you are such a great teacher, or you're so cool, or whatever. And then you get to stay home all day with a 3-year-old that just tells you that, you're the worst person ever, or I don't like you, or, and it was very, very isolating. So that was hard, and really had to learn how to network with other moms.
That actually makes a big difference.
It made a huge difference. And I had some great ladies in our ward, our initial neighborhood that we lived in American Fork, and just we're still great friends today. And they really saved me from that.
How did you find them? Was it just church?
Just friends? Church. And then there is a book club because, we all love books.
Yeah.
And so we all, that was something for me to look forward to every month. And it made a really big difference to have.
We need support.
friends.
And, women, everybody needs a woman,
Absolutely. Women need women.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to be able to chat with each other. And honestly, sometimes I wonder, it used to be, and even now in other countries, a lot of times women will get together at their ancestral home, like with their parents, and all the siblings are there, all the women, and they drink coffee and they talk. And that's their therapy. And now we have to pay people to listen to us, right?
Yes.
So
no, it is.
It should be like that. We should be able to just talk to each other and kind of work through all of these things and recognize. I mean, this is where comparison comes in a good way, because we can look and say, oh, she's doing it like I am. She's having that same issue I am. And this is how she's dealing with it. And this is how we can grow together from learning from each other. So,
one of my favorite paintings, and I just have a print of it in my home, is a James Christensen painting of an angel. And it's based on an Italian poem. She has one wing on the back of her shoulder. And the poem is that we are all broken angels with one wing, and we only ascend by embracing each other. And so that then we can have two wings as we.
Gosh, will you give me that poem? I love
and that is a very loose. Yes, I will find the poem and I'll send it to you. But it's an Italian poem, and it's a lovely painting. But the sentiment is we're all broken. Well, in some regard, and really we feel wholeness as we can step aside from all of the temporary titles we give ourselves. And so I think that it's this balance of saying, yes, I need to recognize that I am whole and worthy as I am, but also there are parts of me that need help and attention. So,
and there's some things that you can do yourself and some things that you're going to need help with.
Yes. And asking for help and accepting help, holy cow, is really hard. So we adopted Damien and Allie, and the weekend that they told us that we had a permanency hearing that we would keep Damien is the weekend I found out I was pregnant with Maggie. After goodness. Like almost 2 years of infertility treatments. And those are terrible too. So we found out I was pregnant with Maggie. So they are 15 months apart to the day. So they're kind of like twins. And then, so we had Maggie, and then we just said, we are never doing that infertility stuff ever again. And so, because it is just wicked.
It's brutal.
So we decided, and because they were so close in age, and Damien is my joy boy and just so energetic and so.
It's interesting because they both are.
Yes.
Maggie and Damien.
But she wasn't originally. They needed each other because she would be prone to just being quiet and subdued and really, but he pushed her to be more outgoing, and she helps him pull back and know how to.
I agree. I think it really helps to have your children, not always, I mean, just have them close emotionally to each other, because they do really help each other, can help each other to lift. But how do you do that as a parent? How do you raise them to lift each other?
Well, so a long time ago, I just back when we had lots of years of just building a company and not making any money. And so I have kept this forever and I won't ever throw it away, but it's just a cheap piece of foam board that I ended up with after working on some primary activity. And so it's just a leftover piece of foam board. We didn't even have money enough to buy, but I thought, I'll just use this foam board from the primary leftovers. And I wrote in marker what the top things I want my children to do. And I stuck it on my wall, and I will never throw that away. But one of them is fierce sibling loyalty, that I just, in everything, it is always siblings first. So like when they were little, if they weren't getting along with siblings when friends were over, friends left. And I said, your sibling relationship is more important than friends. And and so if they ever had like a big fight, then it was like, okay, you're grounded from friends, or because you don't need outside things. You need to focus, or media, screens, you need to focus on each other. And then as they've gotten older, it's just still prioritizing sibling time. And so we have to be really deliberate about something I'm trying to do right now is we made a matrix of the relationships between the 4 kids. So there's a combo of 6
Okay.
when it comes to pairs.
Yeah.
And so I want to spend time with each of those pairs of relationships and just away from the others.
Okay.
So, and because we struggled with infertility and the way our family was made, there's a 6-year gap between Allie and Damien. And then Maggie and Damien are 15 months apart. And then we ended up, surprise, getting pregnant with Lizzie when the keto diet wasn't even a thing. Like, it was just like no one didn't even know about it, but it fixed
whatever was going on.
Infertility. When I did it to help my knee, and all of a sudden I was pregnant. And so there's a huge age gap with my kids between all 4 of them. And so we've understood that is a blessing, because we can, okay, hey, Allie, you're old enough, watch, you can help watch your siblings, or, that there's benefits, but also it's really tricky to try and get your kids to meld.
Right.
And so we've had to be really deliberate about helping them form relationships with those, 13-year age gaps. And I know that, so my mom's family, they have an 18-year gap between her and her youngest sibling. It's been interesting. They are good friends now, and but they didn't even grow up in the same house, and so even with my siblings, my oldest sister and I were friends, but it was when she was going through her divorce that we reached out to each other, and she relied on me. And now that my life has kind of been turned upside down, it's been good to know that my sister has my back and helps out when she can. And I would say that a challenge right now, given medical circumstances, and we can back up and tell the backstory of that, but something that's been difficult for me is just making sure to be intentional and present in the moment. And so, because you feel pain when you live in the past, or anxiety when you live in the future, so really there is peace in the present moment. And so it's been challenging, and it's been scary to try and just stay in the present moment. There are, I wouldn't say scary necessarily, but it's our natural self, this natural man, natural woman. We are prone to be anxious thinking about the future, or we're prone to ruminate and brood over the past. And so being present and mindful and saying, in this moment, this is the way it is, and this is how I am, and really things are okay. Are there, and then we don't even have to put the label on it's going to be okay. We can just say, right now, this is it.
And this is a really important thing for right now. Can we go to the cancer stuff?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So 2 years ago, almost, to the date, I found a lump in my left breast, and just thought, oh, this is normal. I'll just wait a couple cycles and see if it goes away, because I would have lumps come and go. And so it didn't. And so I went and got it biopsied, and found out it was cancer. And the day that I found out, we had been I had been misdiagnosed. And so he had told me that it was a cancer that's fairly easy to treat, and just said, we'll do a lumpectomy, you'll do radiation and just some hormone blockers, and easy. Yeah. And so I was like, whew, okay, we're good.
Which would, okay, let's just stop for a second. Because as soon as somebody says cancer, like most people, it doesn't matter what kind of a cancer is, but like now all the difference.
Yeah. And so it was actually, he said, oh, it's the same kind of cancer your mom and grandma had. And it's never easy. Cancer, there's no way to say like, oh, that's a good cancer, because heaven knows.
Right.
There's no good cancer. But so we got in the car after the appointment, and Nick and I cried, and we both felt like we need a second opinion. It just felt something wasn't sitting right. And that's the heart knowing. It just wasn't right. And so we called Huntsman immediately. Luckily, I mean, it was really towards the end of the day, so I was able to talk to them. And within 12 hours, really, 18 hours, whatever. They had called me the next morning, first thing, and said, we are going to get you in next week. As we're talking, I said, okay, well, it's ER positive. And she said, oh, honey, it's not ER positive. And I said, well, what is it then? And she said, it's called triple negative. And I said, oh, negative, that means it's good, right? And she said, that's the worst. And so that's when the news really broke, was like, no, this is not going to be what I thought it was. And so looking up triple negative, it was a rough day that day. And just because reality had already shifted, but now it was like, holy cow.
Do you think it helped to get like the soft blow first and then
wondered about that? And I don't know. The Huntsman ball got rolling, and I was diagnosed with triple negative stage 3, and went through a clinical trial, and that drug kind of worked, and then it stopped working. And so then I got on a new chemo, the standard of care regimen, and I had to work through that, and ended the tumor
didn't react
like it should have,
right?
And so things were expedited, and I was pushed to surgery, and kind of skipped some treatments. Failed is not the right word, but kind of skipped chemos if they seemed like they weren't working. Anyway.
Yeah, and that was a trial, right?
The trial at first, yes. So I skipped that, and then standard of care, there were some of those treatments that I ended up skipping, or either condensing to dose dense. Anyway, it's a whole cancer world. But I got my mastectomies and finished radiation at the end of August of last year in 23. And then by then I had switched from Huntsman Oncology down to closer to home, just because it was getting exhausting.
Yeah,
driving
I can imagine.
to Huntsman.
Well, and at one point you were going to California too.
Yes.
This comes
up.
Yeah.
And so we had reached out, because it was becoming clear that my cancer mutations and different things were making it extra tricky. The triple negative was already tricky, and then added layer of my different mutations. So we had gone out to California to get some.
Yeah. Speaking of self-advocacy.
Yeah.
You're really good at this.
Yeah. So I was not a stranger to the medical world. This was not my first medical rodeo,
right,
at all. So I am fairly good at meeting with medical professionals and saying, this isn't a good fit.
Yeah.
And I don't like the way this is going, and I don't need to waste my time, and not just trust that, oh, the doctor's going to take care of me. Yeah. There's a reason why it's called medical practice.
Yes.
Because they are practicing, and they are making mistakes.
Yeah.
And the Hippocratic Oath says, do no harm. But when you go into the medical world, you are acknowledging that you are willing to pick up both ends of that stick.
That's right.
That you might get harmed.
Yeah. And you're never going to do it deliberately. And maybe that's what the Hippocratic Oath should say, never deliberately give harm, right?
Yeah.
But because we do have to understand that we are human, and that there is a human error that is definitely prevalent.
And there's litigious, we are so prone in our society to sue people that we tie the hands of doctors a lot of times. And so that's why we ended up going to California, is that the doctors that we were working with at Huntsman weren't willing to do further testing and additional chemos, and we were just willing to throw everything at it.
Sure. And
they weren't, because their hands were tied because of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And so we did go to California for probably 3 chemos, and then for different appointments and things. But then we ended up finding a doctor in Utah County, which was just a huge blessing to be able to be with him, that he would listen and would meet our needs. And so that's where I've been for oncology. I still do Huntsman for radiation and imaging and different things. So I finished radiation, and I say we a lot because it has been a family affair.
Sure.
And so I catch myself and I'll say, we finished radiation, but it was me being radiated.
They weren't sitting with you doing it at the same time, but in your heart,
it was
with you.
A huge family affair. It's been
we go. And that's like having other people surrounding you during these hard times is
and it has important. It has been, my kids are just, they've been superstars through all of this, that they have learned amazing skills that they would have never been able to learn.
And empathy, support,
compassion, and
absolutely,
and helpful, like seeing a need and saying, I'll do that, or being asked to do something and
jump in and do it. I mean, no, they are sweet kids.
They're still
they actually rascals. Are though. No, for real. They live next door to me. I see them.
Really phenomenal kids.
But I also hear the yelling sometimes too. But
and I'm the yeller. Just so you know, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Because
no way.
Yeah. Oh, we were yellers. I was raised with yelling, and Nick was raised by a very calm.
Oh, I can tell that. Yeah.
Very calm.
Yeah, he is very calm.
He kind of it bothers him when I yell. So I have learned to not yell as much, but I still have that in my DNA.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Well, I just had to yell because there were so many people. If I were to be heard, I had to be yelling.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's
and if you're like, because you lived on a farm too, didn't you?
No, we lived. It wasn't a farm, but it was in like a rural part of.
Like biggish property where you're yelling for your kids to come in.
And because we grew up, the neighborhood wasn't developed all the way. And so we would just wander off to the river. I grew up next to the Rio Grande. We'd just wander around, and because there were hardly any houses. And so, my dad would whistle at dark and we'd come home.
Yeah. That sounds similar.
Yeah. But
anyway, yelling.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I'm a yeller.
And being together.
Yes. So I finished radiation at the end of August of last year. My oncologist that I found at Revere here in Utah County was just really proactive and really understood the severity and kind of the risk that I was at, for just saying, there was a lot of people that just would say, I'll see you in 6 months.
Right.
And he just said, no, we're not doing that. You did not follow the rules. This cancer did not follow the rules. We are not going to follow those rules.
Yeah.
And where most doctors would say, we'll see you in 6 months. He said, we're doing a blood draw right now at the end of treatment, and we're going to see if it's this new blood draw to see if there's any circulating tumor DNA. And it came back just very, very slightly elevated. And he said, sometimes it's a false positive. Let's do another draw.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a drawn out process because it's so new and it's not, this quick turnaround. And sure enough, the next one came back even more slightly elevated. And so he said, let's start digging. And so we started digging. And then I had one of my radiation docs at Huntsman that I love. She's the one that said, if you're getting these positives, you need to look at the brain. And so she's the one that helped us really kind of push. We would have gone there, but it might have been a little bit longer. And so we found out in November, that was a very key day, is November 3rd, that we found out it was stage 4, because they found spots in my brain and near my esophagus. So we knew it had spread. And so being stage 4, you just have to, comparison is a thief of joy. Just that you have to say, this is what's happening.
And like you were saying, like living in the present, I think is a really great way to be, because this is it's something where you could look towards the future and say, this is my life for the rest, and have some real anxiety about that, and also look at the past and feel bad about things that maybe you could have done differently or
absolutely.
whatever.
Oh, and still do that. Oh, I absolutely still do that. Yeah. And all of those things are just your go-to, like the easy button.
Yeah.
And you just say, this isn't fair.
Yeah.
And why didn't I do this? And why didn't the doctors do this?
Yeah.
And, all of those things. And so I have a fabulous therapist.
Yeah.
And she is the one that introduced me to radical acceptance. And that's just, it's basically the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer.
Okay.
About the Serenity Prayer.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it's basically that, but steroids. Is just just saying that, we just have to accept that we're all human and we're all going to die, and no one knows when. And something that's been helpful too is just some different cancer support groups, especially the stage 4 support groups, is just the idea that in terms of radical acceptance is that we're all walking on a tightrope.
Right.
And everyone is in the world. Every mortal is walking on a tightrope. Everyone who doesn't have a terminal illness is walking surrounded by a lovely fog. And every once in a while, you get a peek down to the chasm that's below you, and you realize the danger and the fragility of our mortality. But with living with a terminal illness, you have no fog.
There's no fog. You see
and
it.
you are literally on the chasm, and you know that chasm is coming.
Wow.
And the bus that people say, I'm going to get hit. Anyone could get hit by a bus tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the first phrase is, oh, well, we're all going to die. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And it's the difference is, no, the bus is literally coming towards me and I'm standing in wet cement.
Yeah.
And I can't get out. And my family is going to watch me get hit by the bus.
Miriam.
So it's tragic, but it's also that radical acceptance of, yeah, we're all going to get hit by the bus. We're all going to fall off the tightrope. It's just, I have to accept that it's
and you can't stop your life because of that either. And that's one thing that I've really admired about you too, is that you're just plugging forward, as if there's nothing, like, that it's there and you accept that it's there, but you're also not, you're still going to book club. You're still, out there doing all these things that you would be doing otherwise, as long as your health allows you to.
And that's the thing that's been really, actually, I wouldn't say it's not crippling, but it's been really difficult, is that I used to be like
very involved,
super mom, and I talk about like this sphere of things that I used to do was just endless. Like I could do all the things. And now it's like, the size of a dime.
How is that for you?
It was very hard because my identity is tied to achievement. And because
so maybe you are a little competitive.
But I'm competitive against myself.
Against yourself. Okay.
Yes. And so knowing that I could do better has been, because it's, my identity is tied to checking things off my list. And, we talked about this where even at the end of the day, if it wasn't on my to-do list, but I did it, I'll write it on my to-do list.
I know, that's mine right here.
So I can cross it off, because I'm like, okay, so things on my to-do list when I'm not feeling great are things like putting my shoes on and putting my makeup on and going on a walk. Like, those things are sometimes the only things that get done. And because I have to save my energy for the things that are most important, I've had to not volunteer in classrooms, and I've had to not do PTA, and I don't have a church calling. And, it's been hard to give that up.
Well, for sure. And, and you've talked to me before too about, people saying how brave you are for going through this, and how you feel like, well, it's kind of pressed upon me. I have no choice. Right?
Like the other choice is like just not doing anything and letting it take me years,
And that's where the bravery comes. It's in moving forward and putting on your makeup, and putting your shoes on and going for a walk. That's where the bravery comes from, I think, when you are facing something so life-threatening as what you are right now. And so,
and it's just the same. I just owe a lot to my parents that taught me that you don't back down, that the world is sure, you are atypical, and the world is made for typical people, function and thrive, but that doesn't mean that you can't find a place.
And do you think that everything that, growing up with your, what was it called again? IO? OI. Yeah. That prepared you. I mean, this whole life, your whole life has been kind of
for
like
sure.
that.
And I feel like that's something that is an advantage for adults that are asked to go through hard things, is that we have that foundational background of hard things that we've overcome. I mean, being pregnant, hello, like that is, maybe you've had 3 pregnancies, no. I don't know. But my 2 pregnancies, like, I just felt like I was on the brink of death. Sometimes, during those moments. And so we have this frame of reference of, I've done hard things, I can survive, and these are the tools. So perhaps I've had more of those. And so that has made it so that I just, am a little more gritty in that, which can also be a downfall, because sometimes it's like I'm pushing myself too much. And so it's hard sometimes to be like, I need to back down.
So what are you hoping that your children are going to remember of growing up in your home?
I just really hope that there is an overall umbrella of compassion and kindness and connection.
Yeah.
Just the idea life isn't easy for anyone. And so that includes, we don't talk about people's body types. We don't talk about, things that people can't change, their intellect. We can't talk about, those aren't things that we can't judge, because we understand compassion, we understand limitations, and then how to bolster each other up.
Yeah. Being a deliberate mom is a Sendy mom. Like being able to be deliberate about the kinds of things that you're teaching your children, the kinds of things that you're hoping that they will take away from that, as far as like kindness and compassion and whatever, that is just saying, okay, I'm going to deliberately teach these things. And that is definitely sending it as a mom.
So. And we need each other.
Yeah. Like it's a team effort, and we're not here by ourselves. How has that helped you to recognize that you're not alone in all of this?
Well, I have excellent neighbors and friends, and really, honestly, family and friend network has been all of this. Is that because I was the one that was always bringing meals and driving kids and doing, and so it's been very humbling to be on the receiving end, and quite uncomfortable, to be honest, to have to ask for things, or
of course, if it was you that was doing it, then you would just,
oh heavens,
of course,
yes,
what more can I do?
I know, and that's the interesting thing, is that we think that the voice in our head is who we are, because the voice in our head will say things like, you could be the one driving your kid to karate, you could be the one making sure that there's food at the ward carnival.
Okay, so what do you do when those voices come?
Is just realize that's not who I am, and because identify with that voice as it's white noise.
Yeah.
And it's not who we are. And so just remembering the false titles that we all take on. I mean, even when we look at the bigger picture, even the title of career title, that's obviously very temporary. But even like wife and mother is very temporary, that we ultimately are spiritual creations of heavenly parents,
deity,
and
ultimate identity. Yeah, absolutely. And identity is a huge part of it too. I mean, through this conversation, I've recognized that you identify yourself first as a child of deity, but also as somebody who can take care of herself, like independent, but also not reliant upon, but wanting to have your tribe, your people around you, to be surrounded by other people, which is exactly what we need to do. And
we tribes are so important, and we try to fit into a tribe, but ultimately you choose your tribe and you say, these are the people that I can count on and rely on, and I really do feel we're very lucky that we have been in the two neighborhoods as we've been married, and then even my growing up, I've felt the rallying support of people in Albuquerque and people, I feel this, and
you gather more to your side at every place you live and every interaction you have. And I love making new friends because they just add to all of the good that I already have.
It's just this energy that's very uplifting for the whole universe. I mean, it's just this positive additive. And I think that was one of my low experiences, was my first mastectomy, because we had just rushed through all of these chemos and I was really not in good health for my first mastectomy. And I was at the hospital and just at my lowest and thinking, is this it? Like this, I could just close my eyes and be done. And I felt this, and I've thought, I should find a better analogy, but it really is, it felt like these spider webs, these just tiny fibers that there was this abyss, and I felt like I was falling, and these fibers just kept being cast over, and I felt it was the positive energy and prayers and all of these things from all the people that pray all the time, and they just caught me and held me from falling, because I just thought, I'm done. I can't.
I love that analogy, because the fibers do kind of hold us together.
And and one prayer is fantastic, but holy cow, you just have this network of positive
people who love you, and there's an energy in that.
For sure.
I absolutely believe that. Well, I could talk to you all day about all of this stuff.
All day too. I need more Becky in my life. That's one thing that I do have remorse that when we did move into the neighborhood, that is something that was hard, is that I didn't have enough time to make those connections, and then bam, cancer diagnosis, and then it was limiting. So I feel like I just really need more.
Honestly, that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast, was because I feel like I want to know. Everybody has a story, right? All of these beautiful women in this neighborhood, and all these people that I've gathered in my life, and I'm like, I am ready. I want to know what I should have, done this years and years ago, but I feel like I'm at this point in my life now where the connections are so important, the relationships are so important.
Yeah. And I feel like all of us have that little bit of voyeuristic in us that we're like, I would love to know your story.
Yeah.
And so a podcast is a perfect forum.
Absolutely.
For it, just to say, here's your dose of a peek into somebody's life.
Okay, so here's the voyeuristic stuff. I'm going to ask you my rapid fire questions and
fire away
what you have. Okay. So what has brought you joy in the last 24 hours?
In the last 24 hours, Nick and I were I was finally feeling good enough with some of the treatments that have been going on. Haven't felt great. Last month was really rough. So we delayed our anniversary getaway. So we did just the last 2 nights. We stayed up in Salt Lake. And so that was really, really
needed.
Very needed. And it really helped us recharge. Yeah. So that brought huge amounts of joy, was just getting away and really not even having an agenda, just eating good food, being
together. What was the last TV show or documentary that you watched?
So we just started watching Young Sheldon as a family.
I love that. We've been watching that too.
It is
super cute.
So fun. Yeah. Because, and what's nice is watching it as a family is there's like conversation points.
Yes.
That you can say things like, okay, that's bullying, or okay, that's the 80s. This is what, or there's sex stuff that comes up. There's inappropriate relationship, things that we can say, like, let's talk about that.
I love how you're teaching your family. I just watch it with Robert, and we don't talk about any of that stuff. We just laugh. So
it is such a great show.
It is a really cute one. Okay. What was the last really good book that you read?
Well, I'm still reading it, and I could totally binge it, but I have to go to bed at night. But it's Tattoos on the Heart by Greg Boyle.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of that. It's really good. Huh?
It is phenomenal. Yeah. He talks a lot about our relationship with God in ways that are in line with how I feel about our heavenly parents.
I'm going to look that one up.
Oh, it is. There's a little bit of language because he works with the inner city homies. Like he talks about these gang members, and they always call each other homie.
They're homies.
And but he's a priest.
Okay.
But so he uses the language appropriately given the circumstance.
Okay.
So I always have to
preface
to couch it that way.
Okay.
So that I'm not like leading anyone down a path that they're like, gasp.
Oh, I wouldn't do that anyway. You know me.
Language. So anyway, it's Tattoos on the Heart.
Tattoos on the Heart.
Recommend it
I will look at it. Okay, favorite vacation spot?
We love to go to New Mexico and my grandparents' cabin in Alpine, Arizona. But if that's not like a family location, a vacation spot is Moab, Utah, that our family. We love to go to Moab.
What do you do in Moab?
Hike. Kids, they do mountain biking. Nick does mountain biking.
I love to hike.
I don't mountain bike.
I love to hike. And I love to mountain bike too, but I love to hike.
Yeah.
Okay, what's one thing that you try to do every day?
Move my body every day, just because it's so good for my mental health. And I've known that, through postpartum depression, through all the different stages when it's been hardest, is I'm not moving my body.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see you out walking all the time with Nick. So
Yeah.
that's great. Very good. Okay. What is a recommendation that you would have for me for the next thing that I should try?
Well, something that was really hard for me that was totally Sendy,
Okay.
that I pushed me to my limit, that is now fantastically one of my favorite things, is getting Scuba certified.
I have thought about that.
So
Okay.
it's really good in Utah because we have the crater up in
Heber.
Heber. And so you can get certified in warm water. It's 95 degrees.
Perfect. Okay.
And so that was huge.
When did you do that?
We did that probably 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I really loathed Nick for 24 hours because he was the one that kind of was the impetus for let's get Scuba certified.
Yeah.
And it pushed me.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. I've scuba dived once with a guide, and like you get underneath a little bit and your ears start hurting.
You have to regulate.
Yes.
You have to know how to regulate. And then the certifying is terrifying because you have to do things like take your mask off and take your air off and you're 40 feet underwater, and you have to be able to put it back on and clear your mask.
Oh my gosh, that just gives me like heart palpitations just thinking about it, because I'm a little claustrophobic.
And I was way claustrophobic, and that's where I learned how to use mantras. And because that carried me through that, and I have used mantras ever since, like as a huge coping mechanism.
Okay. Well, that was a perfect one to end on, because that's something I have not done and has scared me, has really terrified me. Because as I'm looking through all my questions, I'm thinking, how would I answer this? But that is the one that probably terrifies me that I need to do.
Oh, so, I would highly recommend it. And then once you do your first scuba dive, you're like, that is incredible.
Amazing. Because, where was your first scuba dive?
Hawaii. We did a shore dive in Maui. And because of my bone limitations that have kind of cropped up in my age and the knee issue that I was having, that I still have, I couldn't do a lot of the things that we used to go, like we've hiked Timp, and I just can't do those things anymore. But when you're underwater, you can be like, I want to go over there. And so you go and swim to that coral reef, and you go, there's nothing that's like limiting. Yeah. One of the dives we went on, they said they had one of their divers that comes a lot is blind.
They kind of scare me just a little bit though, right?
And I'm wondering, like, not because I know a little bit this much about the blind world, but there's different levels of blindness.
Okay.
And so maybe they could like still see something.
Yeah, be interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
So diving is very friendly for everyone, and terrifying.
Definitely. Yes. Well, thank you. You've done a lot of terrifying things in your life, and look at how resilient you are and how you've been able to overcome a lot of things, and you're continuing to do so and living your life in crescendo. Just making it the best you can for and living in the moment. And I love those lessons that you taught me today. So thank you.
That's generous of you to say.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Becky.
Thanks for being with us today on Sendy Mom. We hope that you feel really inspired to just go out and do something that maybe terrifies you just a little bit. Be sure and subscribe to our channel. Find us at sendymom.com or on Instagram at sendy.mom, and tell us what makes you a Sendy Mom. We love our Sendy community and hope you find a group of Sendy moms to support you in the things that you want to do. What is that thing that's been really hard that you've been thinking about for a long time? It's time. Come on, just go out and send it.